Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today I'm going to teach you how to create art paper textures in Photoshop. That's art paper, like a handmade paper, and you don't need to download them from the internet. You can actually create something very much like artistic paper in Photoshop using only Photoshop filters and layer modes. So let's try and do this together. Now there are a couple of assumptions that I'm going to be making. So the first one being that you're using Photoshop CC 2015 or later. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, then some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am assuming that you're using Windows like I am. If you're using if you're not using Windows, if you're using a Mac, then whenever I say hit the Control key on your keyboard, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key, that means hit the Option key on the Mac keyboard. So with that out of the way, let's get started by creating a brand new document. Hit Control N on your keyboard to open up the new dialog box, and then let's change the width to 3840 pixels and the height 2160 pixels. The resolution will be 150 pixels per inch. Color mode of RGB color 8-bit. Background will be whatever color it wants to be, even transparent. It doesn't matter. We'll be changing it anyway. The color profile is Adobe RGB 1998, and the pixel aspect ratio is square pixels. Hitting OK, and we now have our new document. Now the first thing that we're going to need to do is change our foreground and background colors to the proper colors, and the foreground color is going to be E4D581. Okay, and the background color that we're using today is 957E3F. Once you have those two colors, what we're going to do with our background layer, first of all, is we are going to click on the little lock icon to unlock the background layer. It will automatically rename itself layer 0, and that's all that we need to do there. Then we're going to go to Filter, Render, and Clouds. That will give us a base to work with that looks kind of shadowed and highlit. So that will give us a base of shadow and highlights for our paper. The next thing that we're going to need to do is, going back to our layers palette, we're going to create a new layer, layer 1 now, and we're going to go to Filter, Render, Fibers. Now the numbers that we're using here in the options is going to be variance of 25, strength of 10, and then we can hit randomize a few times until we see something that we like. It doesn't matter really, just make sure that it's something you find appealing. This looks good to me, so I'm going to hit OK, and we now have our fibers and our cloud layer. And what we're going to do now is change our fiber layer mode. So layer 1 is now going to be changed to multiply. So we're going to go here to multiply, and we now have what looks like a base for paper. So now we've got layer 1 and layer 0, and what we want to do is create a new layer that combines layer 1 and layer 0. So we're going to hit CTRL+ALT+Shift and then the letter E on our keyboard, and that will bring up a new layer called layer 2 that is a combination of layer 1 and layer 0. So if I turn off layer 2, you'll see no difference because it is a combo of layer 1 and layer 0. We no longer need layer 1 and layer 0, so we can throw them away if we so wish, and I so wish. So now we've got layer 2 sitting here doing nothing for us except looking kind of like, almost like paper, but not really. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to give this a little bit of movement left to right. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use the wind filter. So we're going to go up here to Filter, Stylize, and Wind. And that will give us a wind blowing across wet paint look, so it will blow everything left or right. Now, wind itself, the method, you can choose wind, blast, or stagger. Wind gives you very little variance. Blast blows almost everything away, and stagger is somewhere in between. I like to use stagger because it is somewhere in between, and you can see the difference. For this tutorial, I'll be using from the right. You can always use from the left. It gives you basically the same thing, just depending which way you want the look to go. Now I'm going to hit OK, and we now have a slight movement to our paper texture. Now it's not quite enough, so what we're going to want to do is hit CTRL+F 2 more times. That will repeat the wind filter. So hit CTRL+F once, CTRL+F twice, and we now have a lot more movement than we did before in our paper texture. So now what we want to do with layer 2 is we want to duplicate this 2 more times so that we have 3 layers of the same texture. So so let's duplicate this by bringing it down twice so that we now have 3 layers of the same thing. And then we're going to rename these layers with layer 1 on the bottom, layer 2 in the middle, layer 3 on the top. And what we're going to do now is for layer 3 and layer 2, we are now going to use the Liquify filter to liquefy them. So let's turn off layer 3, leaving layer 2 as our active layer. Go up to Filter, go to Liquify, and we are now in the Liquify filter. Now the options that we're going to use are really only going to be the brush tool options. We're not going to touch any of the other options that you see here, the face aware, load mesh, mask, view, and the brush reconstruction options. What we're going to do is we're going to make the size 1200 pixels. We're going to make the density 50, pressure 100, and the rate is going to be 0. Now that's a very large brush to start with. So actually let's lower the brush down to about 900 pixels. So the size now is 900. And what we're going to do is we're going to be using this first thing here, which is the forward warp tool, which is W on the keyboard as it says. And we're going to move the texture around so that we get more lines in it. It's a little confusing what I'm saying, but let me show you what I mean. If I click and drag, you'll see that it creates kind of, it pulls everything to the left with me. And if I pull to the right, it pulls to the right. And if you make little circles, you kind of make knots, and then you can pull that, and you're getting kind of a texture where it looks like there are fibers in the texture, right? So that's what we're looking for. So make little circles every now and again to give you some more lines to work with, and then just move things around. Now don't be afraid of getting close to the edges, because if, oops, you make a mistake and you see the transparency underneath, you just have to push it back. So you can't really make too many mistakes, and as my old teacher used to say, mistakes can always end up as happy mistakes. So don't be afraid to make some mistakes and just move things around. What we're really looking for is to make the wind-looking movement into something more like fibers underneath. So we want to have fibers with the movement that we'll have on the lowest layer, layer number 1, will be the movement, and these will be the fibers that you see within the movement of the paper. So as long as you don't have any transparency around the outside, whatever you do on the inside is fine. So this looks like a big mishmash of nothing, but it will look fine once we get done with the rest of the filter. So let's leave this as is, hit OK, and we now have our first layer of fibers for our paper. Okay, then we're going to go up to layer 3, turn that on to make it active, and we are going to do the same basic thing. So let's go to Filter and Liquify again, and this time we will make the size of the brush about 1200 so that it's a little bit bigger. And we're going to do the same basic thing, making fibers, but we're going to do it a little bit broader so that they aren't so small, and we're going to make fewer of them but larger. So to show you what I mean, let's start by making a little circle here like that, and then just pull that out to the side. Let's make another circle here and pull that down, another circle over here and pull that up, fix that up there, another circle here, and let's pull that down. And you see I'm not making too many this time. It's mostly just these big fibers. So that's kind of where we want this one to be. We don't want to go too much because we've already done a lot in that first liquefied texture. So let's hit OK. And we now have 2 textures of fibers in our paper. All right. So what we're going to want to do now is the layer 2. We're going to want to set this to lighten mode. So we're going to make this lighten, and we're going to make it 75%. So let's go to about 75%. Let's just type it in. That's always easier just to type it in when you know exactly what you want it to be. So that's that one. And then layer number 3, we want this to be hard light and 50%. So we're going to make this hard light, and we're going to make it 50%. And as you can see, we now have fibers that are inside the paper, but it doesn't quite look like paper yet. Don't worry, we're going to fix that with the next few things that we're going to be doing. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to get new colors for our foreground and background. So let's change the foreground color to a darker color. Let's go with C7 B889. B889. That'll be slightly darker than what we had before. And then our background color, we will change to 654 D10. So a much darker brown than we had before. Then we're going to create 2 new layers. So let's create 2 new layers. And on each of these layers, we're going to render clouds, but we're going to render clouds 3 times on each of these 2 layers. So let's go to Render, Filter, Render, and Clouds. And then we're going to hit Control-F, Control-F. So now we've got that on that layer. Then we're going to go to Layer 2, and we're going to hit Control-F, 1, then Control-F2, Control-F 3 times. So now we have 2 completely different rendered clouds of the darker colors. Okay, then on the bottom layer here, layer 1 now, we are going to go to Filter, Filter Gallery. And if you haven't played with Filter Gallery, let me just say you should always play with it. It is a whole lot of fun to play with. You can use it just about anywhere for anything that you might want. So the first one that we're going to use is Artistic and Palette Knife. So let's go to Artistic, top one, and then Palette Knife right here. And that will give us blotches of dark and light browns. Okay, and what we're going to use is we're going to use a stroke of 20. So let's make this 20. Stroke detail of 3, and softness is going to be 0. And then we're going to hit OK because we have what we want. And then we're going to change that layer mode to overlay. So we're going to change this to overlay, and we're going to make it 50%. So now we've got 50%. Then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to this top layer, layer 2, and we are going to do Filter Gallery again. So Filter, Filter Gallery, Artistic, and we're going to go down here to, let's see, where are we going with this? I'm sorry. We're going to go to Smudge Stick. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go to Smudge Stick, and we're going to use 2, 0, and 10 for our options. And then we are going to hit OK. And we are then going to change our layer mode to Color Burn. And we are going to change the opacity of this layer to just 10%. That is looking more like paper, but now it just kind of looks like a mishmash of garbage, doesn't it? But that will change. So now we've got all of these layers working for us, and we're going to create a new layer on top of it that is all these layers combined. So we're going to hit, again, Control-Alt-Shift, and then the letter E to give us a brand new layer of everything combined. We are then going to turn off all of those layers. We can throw them away if you want, because we no longer need them. Okay, then we're going to duplicate this layer so that we have 3 of these layers. So we're going to go Control-J, Control-J, and we now have 3 layers. All right, on the bottom layer, bottommost layer, which is now called layer 3, we are going to go to Filter Gallery, Filter Gallery, Brush Strokes, and Splatter. So we'll go down here to Brush Strokes, and we're going to go to Splatter. And we are going to use the highest settings that you can, so 25 and 15 to give us our splatter. And we're going to hit OK. And we now have that on the bottom, like so. Then on the second layer here, this is where it gets a little tricky. We're going to use two of those filter gallery filters. So we're going to go to Filter, Filter Gallery. And if you never noticed, over here on the right of the filter gallery, if you've never used it before, this will be a little lesson in how to use it. And if you have used it but never noticed this, this is something that you'll like learning. You can add more than one filter at a time over here. So right now we are going to use splatter at the highest settings, and then we're going to add another filter, new filter effect, and we are going to make this a palette knife. So we're going to go to Artistic and Palette Knife, and we're going to change the palette knife to stroke of 25 up there. Now if you wanted to also, you can move these so that the palette knife is on the bottom and the splatter's on top, which gives you a slightly different look. But we want the splatter to be on the bottom and the palette knife to be on the top. That's where we want things to be. So everything else here is good. So 25 by 3 by 0, and the splatter is 25 by 15. Palette knife is on top, splatter is underneath, and we are then going to hit OK. And we now have what looks like blotches under there. So we are going to change this layer mode to darken because we want the darkness to show through very well. And we're going to change its opacity to 60%. And then we're going to turn on our top layer, and we're going to go back to Filter Gallery, and we're going to go to Artistic and Caricature. So we need to find Caricature. That's under Texture, actually, not Artistic. Sorry. Caricature. Okay, and the what we're going to use here for our options is going to be 15, 10, and 3. We're going to get rid of splatter. We don't need that. So we're going to throw that one away. And now we've just got our caricature. Now this is going to give us a little bit more texture. So let's hit OK. And you can see that we have a little bit of texture here, but too much. So we're going to want to change this to overlay. And we're going to give it a 15% opacity. So it's just barely there. And we now have what looks like pretty good paper. If I zoom in real close, you can see it has fibers running through it. So let's bring this back down to regular size. And there you have paper that can be used just about anywhere for all of your artwork. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, a thumbs up, and subscribe. I'll be creating new tutorials every Tuesday. Once again, my name is Geekman, signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.